Lovely. Good evening. Good to see so many people here this evening. I've just got a few housekeeping notes to read out ahead of the session, and then I'll hand over to James. So I need to notify everyone that this climate conversation is being recorded and will be placed on YouTube over the coming weeks and will be available there in the public domain for a period of 6 months. If you do not wish to be recorded, please turn off your cameras. If you lose connection for any reason during the session, please rejoin using the original link and CEAG colleagues will readmit you as soon as you enter the waiting room. This evening's conversation will start with the presentations, during which time you can put your questions forward using the Zoom chat function. CEAG members will collate these questions and put them to our speakers on your behalf at an appropriate time. Dependent obviously on time, we can obviously open up the floor some questions. I think the way it's probably going to work tonight is we're going to have the 3 sessions, then we'll have the questions all together at the end. To minimise disruption this evening, all microphones will be muted. Please note, do ask you to keep your questions on tonight's subject. Any rude or offensive comments, inappropriate interruptions may result in your removal from the session. Okay, I'm just going to hand over, my pleasure, to hand over to Councillor James Bradbury, who will be facilitating and chairing this evening's meeting. Thanks, Sam. Over to you, James.
Hello, thank you, Matt. Welcome, everybody. So we're talking about sustainable transport this evening. We've got a variety of speakers for you. I'll introduce them briefly and say what they're going to talk about, and then I'll hand over to the first one. So first of all, we're going to have Rob Elkins, who is a committee member on Cycle Chippenham, or the Chippenham Cycle Network Development Group, and he'll be talking about cycling in and around Chippenham. Next, we've got Richard Moulton of Spindles Bikes, which is based in Corsham. I believe there's also recently one opened up in Whitley. He'll be talking about electric bikes, cargo bikes, bike maintenance, and he's had a lot of experience cycle touring long distances and doing wheel building and so on for many years. More so even myself, so it'd be interesting to hear from him. Then we've got John Scragg, who is the Councillor John Scragg is Chippenham's mayor, and he has a lot of experience of public transport in and around Chippenham and in general trains and buses, and it's a lot of experience from friends and colleagues of his who have experience on the railways as well. So after that we'll be doing some questions and answers, and so yes, if you put your questions in the chat, then we'll get to those later. So I'll go on to mute and hand over to Rob for the first presentation.
Thanks, James. Thanks for having me, Chippenham Town Council. Can everyone hear me okay? Because I've just put the headphones in. I'm afraid I'm doing this mid-bedtime, so I apologise now about any wailing you hear in the background, but fingers crossed it works out okay. I'm just going to share my screen and load up the presentation. Nick Murray carefully put this together for me, so I apologise if I am reading it anew, just like you. So I'll talk through it as I go, and no doubt end up going back as much as forwards. But so I'm a member of the Chippenham Cycle Network Development Group, capitally named. So we changed it to Cycle Chippenham to make it a little bit easier to roll off the tongue. Generally, we've been up and running now for about 2 years. Our main purpose is to do whatever we can to improve the networks available to cyclists within Chippenham, and obviously that's on-road, that's off-road, quiet lane, etc. So who we are, we're a group of volunteers, enthusiasts, passionate locals, civil engineers, highway authority people. So it's a really good group. I've been roped into being the treasurer for some reason, even though I'm an architect, so I'm not sure. If anyone else wants to join and become treasurer, I'd welcome you there. And likewise, if you've got anything to add to the conversation about cycle networks, we welcome anyone to join the group. And really, we just want to get as much out there as we can. So that's our website over on the right-hand side. So yeah, as I said, our main purpose is obviously to improve the network. So our objective: promote inclusive travel, reduce traffic and congestion, reduce carbon emissions, improve air quality, ease parking spaces. It's a big one that a lot of car drivers forget, that everyone cycling a bike that may be holding you up in front of you is actually taking someone out of the parking space that you may want to park in at the end. Support and integrate reliable public transport, and generally support a healthier community. I mean, a lot of sustainability goals generally. what we've been doing. Well, essentially, we were given a tranche of money from the local area board and a few other sources that we've been using to invest where we can in developing the network. And some of that's been picking off some low-lying fruit, and some of it has been some more fundamental sort of propaganda or sort of policy-based stuff looking towards driving the network forwards. So what we're planning on, stage one, we've been building a priority route map, essentially looking at when funding comes in to the various pots of money, how it might be spent on the Chippenham network. Up until now, there's been a Sustrans map that was done in 2013. There hadn't been any development on that until we formed a couple of years ago. And ultimately, that was done on a mass Wiltshire-wide scale. So it's nice to have been able to entrench ourselves more in the Chippenham community as all local cyclists. So first thing we did was we built this map, which isn't very detailed at the minute and is unfortunately not allowed to go public just yet because there's all kinds of liability issues and all the rest of it that happens with it. But it allows us to really formulate our responses to planning applications, to policy basis going forwards, and to hopefully integrate this into a sort of wider policy, local plan based and so on going forward, so that money is targeted towards the best possible locations. As you can see, we've been trying to create arterial routes into town. Light blue is quiet on-road, dark blue is off-road cycle routes. New ones that are popping up that haven't been added to this yet, but obviously we'll be adding to it as we go, and hopefully that will be accessible soon. This was, we identified some pots of money that Wiltshire Council hold on to, 106 contributions when developments happen. And this was one of the pots of money that was left over from one of the developments, sort of Sainsbury's direction. And one of the key problems that we spotted on the route coming in from that way was the lack of cycle path that threw you out through the narrow passage as you get to between sort of B&Q and the Esso garage on the far side there. So we identified the pot of money. We told Wiltshire Council that this is where we thought it should be spent, and they've gone ahead and done the improvements to take you up to the little walkway tunnel there so that you pop out on the other side. And recently we then got involved with the planning application for the Esso garage on the far side as the next snag point that you couldn't get past on a bike. And they've agreed as part of the expansion plans for that to now put in a cycle, well, to allow land at the front that we can use to put the cycle path past the Esso garage. But as you can see, it's slow movement on the major network improvements. So we've been picking off some sort of smaller bits that we can with the pot of money that we have. So we've done some bits like this, which is a drop curb. We picked up where cycle paths existed, but maybe there'd been some omissions in signage or access onto the path. So we've been going through and picking up as many of those. We've got a long list of those. So if anyone knows of any, please do identify them to us, and we'll add them to the list and work out where they sit in the sort of hierarchy of when they should be done. We put in a lot of new cycle parking around town. One of the principal negatives that was identified, I used to live in Bristol, and the big problem they had there was they put a lot of cycle paths in, and then everyone just locked their bikes up all over fences and people's property because there was nowhere to lock your bike. So they did a large tranche of investment. So it's been great. We've been able to put in a series of these, as you can see. Basically, what we've been doing is identifying locations that people might want to ride to and then checking if there's parking there, and if not, then putting parking in. So there's lots of lockups going in around town. The next bit Nick wanted me to speak on was the benefits of cycling, which any of the presenters here, I'm sure, are well aware of the benefits of cycling and the passion that we bring to it. There's obviously things outside the getting to go cycling. And these are some very sort of conservative estimates of the carbon saved of you getting out of your car and getting on a bike and riding to work, or taking a bus, and just the improvements that you can do, which I think it's obviously improving the local air quality. The less that you're sitting in a queue coming out of Monkton Park down Station Hill or thing, the better the air quality that you're creating, and also the more fun you're having going past the queue. Keeping fit and losing weight. I mean, a lot of these are pretty obvious things that you can do, but it actually improves your mental health. Physical exercise is great for generally improving your mental health and making the day seem a lot easier when you get to work and you've done some exercise and then sitting in front of a computer screen. So it's fantastic to get out early in the morning and get woken up on the way to work. And you do appreciate your local environment more, and that's any kind of transport outside of the car, but where you're not in a homogenized box, where you can actually experience the sounds and the smells of Chippenham and its surrounds, you'll find yourself wondering what new shop is opening or where you might take the bike next weekend, etc. So the more you go out, the more it becomes second nature to be out on your bike, and you find more and more routes, and then hopefully you get hooked on it like we did, and then you start trying to sell it to other people as well, because the more we can all do, the better. Saving time, it's questionable with the new traffic light system, but anyway, it's one of the joys. It's there are some great cycle paths around Chippenham when you can drop onto them and avoid the road network, and certainly we've been doing a bit to hopefully do that. And obviously there's a big saving you can make on not owning a car or not regularly running a car and not needing to put all that petrol into it or the servicing on it. There's plenty of fantastic bike shops around them, especially in Caution, that do some wonderful services for very cost-effective ways to keep your bike easy to ride. And essentially that's the end of my presentation. I think when we talked earlier on as the presenters, we thought maybe it would be better to take questions toward the end, and then we can try and all address them together. So unless there's anything that
if you're like me and you're worried about forgetting your question, you can pop it in the chat now and we'll pick it up. We'll go back and review them all, but when everybody's finished, so feel free to do that now. You don't need to wait till the end.
Fantastic. Well, that's all I've got to say. I hope you'll get on a bike after this meeting, or walk or take the bus, but yeah, I'll hand you back over. Ooh.
Okay, thanks very much, Rob. Okay, so as Gary said, put your questions in the chat. And next up, we've got a presentation on electric bikes and other useful technology. Worth noting that electric vehicles will be covered in a separate webinar, so save your questions for that. And I'm sure Michael or Matt can let you know when that's happening. But next up, we've got electric bikes and other useful technology from Richard. You're muted, Richard.
Sorry about that. I'm just sharing my desktop now. Can everyone see that? Can everyone see that? Can everyone hear me? Good. Okay. Okay, thinking about getting an electric bike. How does it work? Well, the thing is that you need to be turning the pedals, turning the cranks in order to engage the motor. And that's basically how electric bikes work. So there's sensors in the crank that detect movement, sends a message to the controller, and then the controller picks up that message and then sends power to the motor. And the controller also monitors the speed, and there's a legal cutout of 15 miles an hour. So pretty much whatever your electric bike looks like, most of them are going at 15 miles an hour on the flat. You can also alter the power, set the power to either low or high, and so that governs how much work you're putting in versus how much work the motor's putting in. And the upshot is that, well, I live in Caution and I can get to Melksham quite easily in 20 minutes without too much effort. And although electric bikes are heavy because they've got a battery, they've got a motor and all the rest of it, they feel light to ride. So that's the first thing you really want to understand, is that electric bikes are really light when in their feeling. So the motor is located in various different places. Either it's in the wheel, so on the left-hand side you've got an electric bike there where the motor's in the front wheel, and then there's the mid-drive motors, which are turning the cranks. And as the cranks are turning, and that's operating the gears, you get a higher range with a mid-drive motor, and so that's considered the better design, but it is more expensive. Having said that, there's some really, really good front wheel motor bikes around, and yeah, we've seen some very good solutions to that. So they are cheaper. The range is less because the motor's not really driving the gears, and sometimes punctures can be quite awkward to fix because you've got a big cable going through a central axle. So choosing an e-bike, you want to really think about what you want to use it for. If you look at the options on the right, you've got a racing bike at the top there, and that might be good for commuting. But then if you're commuting, you might want to think about going to the shops and doing a daily shop or something like that. And so maybe the racing bike isn't the solution for you. So you want to think about what you're going to be using it for, whether you're going to be carrying any weight, where you're going to be doing the school run. And the bottom one there is a bike set up to carry a couple of kids and a bit of shopping as well. So, and also think about, for commuting, things like lights and mud guards, and a rack as well to put your panniers on if you're doing a bit of shopping. What we would say is to try it out first, if you can, and then try a number of them and see what really suits you. Another consideration might be you want to take it on holiday, so you might want to put it onto your car, and so it has to be light enough to actually manhandle onto the top of onto your rack of the car. So you might already have a bike, and you might want to think about converting it. And there's loads and loads of options out there. And eBay is full of different wheel motor kits and mid-drive kits. But the ones that we tend to do are switch kits because they're really simple, they're really light. It's a front wheel motor system. The range is quite low, but that might be okay for most people. A 20-30 mile range is probably perfectly adequate for most people. The more sophisticated kits can be quite difficult. There are some gotchas in there, and then you want to think about the warranty as well. Can you get spare parts? And we have had occasions where a display has gone, and trying to find the equivalent display is quite difficult. Cargo bikes, arguably a real game changer. They look really heavy, but again, because of the motor, they're really light to ride. I recently did a run to Melksham, and then to Whitley, and then back to Chippenham, and then back here, and you don't really feel the weight. Electric bikes allow you to go a lot further than you normally would do with an ordinary bike. And cargo bikes come in lots of different shapes and sizes. The three-wheelers, the trikes, are much more difficult to get used to because a trike is an entirely different turning, steering mechanism, and that takes a little bit of getting used to. But the two-wheeler cargo bikes are really just like riding a normal bike. I've got a stat down there, 25% of all families with 2 or more children in Copenhagen have a cargo bike. So starting out, you've got your bike, you want to learn how it performs, how it works, how the different modes work. You've got different modes for low power or high power. Does it behave differently when you've loaded it up? and then get an idea of the sort of range that it can do. If you've got, how far have you gone on 80% of battery discharge, for instance? If you're commuting, you want to find the quietest route from A to B, really. And one of the useful websites is betterbybike.info. And then test the route first before you do it properly for the first time. Yeah, wear high-vis and helmet, and be seen. And if it's a long time since you've last ridden a bike, then you might consider getting some kind of coaching. That's available as well. And then the other thing is to learn how to fix a puncture, and getting good puncture resistant tyres such as Marathon Pluses is essential, and they don't always come as standard. So that's really worth considering, is to upgrade on the tyres when you purchase your bike. So things to remember, this is one of the most common questions I get in the shop. If you're freewheeling downhill, does it charge the battery? And no, it doesn't, because bikes just aren't heavy enough. Cars, electric cars will charge the battery when they're freewheeling, but bikes won't. Again, there's another, can't emphasize enough, use good puncture resistant tyres, and that really saves you so much. Maintenance, it is going to be higher than an ordinary bike, and so you will be replacing worn chains and brakes. And certainly for mid-drives, the mid-drive design, you're putting in power and the motor's putting in power, and that's all going into the chain. And if you're cruising at 15 miles an hour, which is the legal limit, then you're going to be sitting in the same gear. And so if it's a cassette, that'll be wearing the same sprocket over a long period of time. And so you might end up quite high maintenance costs over a period of time. The other thing is get a good lock. And what I recommend is, there's a really good film called Motherload. It's an American film that came out a couple of years ago. And if you go to that website, motherloadmovie.com, it's really worth watching. It's about a woman who discovered cargo bikes, really, and then discovered there's a whole world out there of people who are using cargo bikes. So that's my presentation. Look forward to any questions that you've got. I'll stop sharing.
Okay, thanks very much, Richard. Okay, so yeah, that was really interesting. Hope to hear more from you later in the question and answer session. We've now got Councillor John Scragg, our Mayor, who is going to talk to us about public transport. Go ahead, John. You're on mute at the moment, John.
Yep. Can you see me all right?
Yeah, we can see and hear you.
Well, that's good. Yeah, I usually be able to see myself on the screen, but I don't seem to be able to this time. But right, let's. Yes, Michael is sharing the screen for me. Is that clear to everyone? If it's not, tell me, James. Yeah. Right, it's not very clear to me, but I'll let's see. I'll commence. Yeah, the main task this evening is to talk about buses, and we do look to try and encourage people to change from get out of their cars and use the buses where it's sensible, and or use bicycles or walk. And you may see that Wiltshire Council did a survey a while ago trying to determine what people use buses for, and work was 24.8%, shopping 51.6%, family and friends visits about a third, doctors and other medical places 16.4%, and getting out and about generally, which is what I like to do, 48.2. I'm not too sure whether they all add up to a neat 100. It looks a bit more than that. But anyway, there's a lot of words on what I'm showing, but you don't have to read them all. I'll read them out, and it's easier for me to use this as a prompt. But the survey also showed that bus usage was the highest among children and young people. It tailed off drastically for those from about 25 until retirement age, and then those like me who are retired, it doesn't feel like that actually, but those who are retired use the buses quite a lot, not least because we have concessionary passes. But I also like going on buses, and the introduction of the concessionary
Has anybody else lost audio?
Yeah, I can't hear John.
Yeah.
I think.
I
Yeah.
think it's frozen a little bit.
Oh,
We've lost John, potentially lost John completely at the moment. So
I can hear you now. Can you hear me?
Yeah. If you want to keep
Okay.
your camera off, John, it might help with your connection.
Yes. I might try that. See. It's a bit fiddly.
We can hear you fine, just as you are now.
yeah, John, it's Michael. Yeah, John, it's Michael. If I were you, John, I would carry on with your presentation, but keep your camera off.
I thought I'd turned it off.
Yeah, so we can hear you, John.
Yeah.
So I would just continue with your presentation. I've got your presentation on the screen in front of everybody, so I would just carry on with where you got to, if that's okay.
Straight from my computer. It might be better. So I can't really see what's on there at the moment.
I think you were talking about the bus usage was highest.
Oh right, here we are. It's coming up. Right. There you are. I'm trying to move the page down. Right, done that. Yes, right. Yes. So again, we consulted the people of Chippenham as part of the neighbourhood plan development, and in town it's surprised. Some of the figures are quite surprising, but 60% of the people get to town by walking. I do, and I guess Chippenham's quite a compact town. So if you're in Monkton Park or the sort of Sheldon Road or places like that, you can probably walk in, and it's a bit further from Pewsham or the far reaches of Seaton Park. But anyway, 60% walk in, and 31% use their cars, 5% use cycles, and sadly only 3% use the buses. But of course, most bus routes come from out of town, and clearly you can't easily walk into town from the villages, and so many of the people who come into town come from outside the boundaries of the town. And then we'll move down a little bit, down the page a bit more, if we can. So looking at the question of taking the bus to work, although a fair number do from outside the town especially, one of the problems is that not all the bus routes, the times of the bus routes coincide with a working day. Although Chippenham is quite comprehensively served by buses, if you're going to work in a place that's not in the town centre, you might have to change buses, and the connections might not be good. So it could well take over an hour to get for a fairly short distance from home to the workplace, and that is a problem. And I think Wiltshire Council has identified that Bumpers Farm in particular is a place that's not easy to get to by public transport, and they are looking at doing some sort of surveys to see whether there could what the sort of pattern of work is, whether people start and pack up work, whether there's enough to actually justify a bus that's gone up there. You may know that Dyson's campus is at Malmesbury and Hallamington. Certainly Malmesbury have buses that take their employees to their towns, and sort of about 4:30 or 5 o'clock. I often see one of the coaches that comes from Dyson's. It's now run by Turners of Bristol. It used to be run by Andy James buses and Andrew James. So if we move down a little bit more on the screen, thank you very much. There's just a map there which Fairsaver produces. They put it on their website, but they're not quite up to date because they run the service to Pewsham and also service out towards Carn and Devizes in addition to that. But we're quite good and have quite a comprehensive bus network that people can use, and their town buses, although they start they don't start early enough for travel to work. They do cover a lot of Chippenham, and the way that it goes, you might be able to get on a bus in Pewsham, and that bus actually goes through to the other side of town to maybe Ladyfield Road or Barrow Green, and so it is quite a useful bus, even to go to surgeries and hospital and that sort of thing. But one of the problems is, as I say, that these buses don't start very early because the resources of Fairsaver, especially, they're devoted to school buses until about 9 o'clock, and to lay on a bus during that period between like 7:30 and 9 is a very expensive business if you have to employ somebody else on top of their staff. So if you move down a bit more, yes, okay, move down a bit more. That's it, and that's just a list of the buses that do actually provide useful timings and for people to go to work on buses, and the routes X31 to Bath and 55 to Carl and Swindon are 20 to 30 minutes each. They each run about that time, so they're quite useful frequencies. Okay, move down a bit more. So we want to encourage people to go on buses more, and we perhaps really need more frequent buses and buses that cover a great deal more of the day. But if we do lay on extra buses, they really have to be sustainable, not just in terms of environmental. And certainly there's a lot of activity going on to introduce electric buses, electric battery buses, hydrogen cell buses, and in Bristol there's a fleet of about 50 biogas buses, and they're all contributing to the reduction in the carbon emissions. And how we can introduce buses like that in Chippenham, we certainly probably need government grants to assist the operators to install the necessary infrastructure and buy the buses, and that is just to see how that works. Okay, move down another bit of the. So looking at the future, in fact today Wiltshire Council Cabinet considered proposals for meeting the government's initiative, the requirements in the government's initiative to introduce improved bus services, and the Wiltshire Council already got about £800,000 towards certain measures to improve the services. That's quite a lot, but not exactly a huge amount compared with how much they spend in subsidising country bus services. But anyway, I've no doubt that the Cabinet agreed to the Wiltshire Council's proposals, recommendations. I wasn't at the meeting, so I don't know exactly what went on, but I read the briefing beforehand. As you see, we're looking to introduce through the neighbourhood plan and in conjunction with Wiltshire information on buses, electronic and real-time information, improve the bus shelters. If you look at the bus shelters in Bath Road in Chippenham, the seats are very uncomfortable. They're more like perches, and I'd like to see much more comfortable waiting areas. And perhaps at the bus station, we think that's a very important facility that should be retained and improved, and perhaps a little bit better weather protection. Move down a little bit more, and a bit more of the page. Yep. So there's a lot there, and I'm sure we could make a copy and make it available more publicly. But yes, I think you can move down again. Yeah, that's it. To mention that the items for Chippenham, as well as many other parts of Wiltshire, but we're looking for extending those town bus services to make them more useful for people going to work. New bus routes are planned for the new areas of housing development, and other bus services to Devizes and Walton Bassett and Swindon. The evening services and other connections are being reviewed, and hopefully there'll be some improvement there. And Wiltshire is also looking at demand responsive bus services for rural areas, and it's already been successful in having such transport where you phone up and ask for the bus to divert off a particular route to serve your village. And they're going to look at whether that can be expanded a little bit more. So if let's just move down again. Yeah, I'll just conclude now, but our neighbourhood plan specifies or recommends that when new development is being built, that the roads are suitable for buses, that they can access estates well, and they're not hindered by parked cars that are parked at curbsides and so on. And there's a bus service in Bath that goes to a new housing estate, which used to be on the site of the former MOD Fox Hill site, and that's called Mulberry Park. And as you see, I was there during the week, and although there seem to be lots of parked cars there, they're all in little lay-bys, and they are specifically for the residents of the flats nearby. The bus can come down and without hindrance, and that's quite a good design, I think, and that's what we want to see in other places. And yeah, we're looking to hopefully have the bus companies will embrace these areas and serve the new areas well. So I don't know whether there's any more there, but I had on my own screen, no, that's it. There's lots of information further down on my page about the new electric buses and how they work, and that can be the subject of another webinar. On my own screen, I just added a couple of photos. One was I was in Dunkirk 2 years ago, and the bus services there are entirely free, 24/7 for everyone. And I was even able to go on a bus. I was staying in Belgium, and I was able to go across the border to Dunkirk, and for nothing as well. So, and then I also went to Luxembourg and paid very little for my train fare there, and it's now all free, the whole country. I'm not necessarily suggesting that we adopt that, but it will be interesting to see the economics of it and how much it's improved the number of people riding. So looking out for all sorts of innovative solutions to ensuring that we get to zero carbon neutrality or zero carbon bus operation and so on by at least 2040 or 2050. But I do hope that will be achieved. So thank you very much, and I hope you enjoyed that, and I'll be glad to answer any questions. Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much, John.
Yeah, I hope the technology worked adequately.
Yeah, that was good.
Thank you.
Yeah, so yeah, thanks to all the speakers. We'll be moving on to our questions now. I'm hoping that we have some good questions. People have had their minds stimulated by this, and hopefully be inspired to take some more sustainable transport options. And if you already do take sustainable transport options, to do things to encourage others to join you. One of the things I've done is, as a very enthusiastic, some would say obsessed cyclist, to offer to escort people to work on their first commute. I'm sort of a confident cyclist on the road, and so I can help people with safety and with planning their route, and maybe any maintenance concerns they might have. So if you're already confident in that, I mean I'm sure John can advise you on what bus to take where and that sort of thing as well. So there's things we can do if we're already engaged with this. But I think if I pass over to Kerry now, you might have questions.
Yeah, there's been lots of, if people are more comfortable putting their hands up as well at this point, rather than typing in the chat, please do that as well. And there's been lots of very interesting sort of comments and discussion about people's walking routes and things happening at the council in relation to bus services and developments there, and a couple of questions. There's a question from Rob just now about whether the council could think more freely about the existing land usage, so thinking about the amount of residential property, flats or houses that could be put on the bus station area, and using that money to fund bus routes and bus hubs rather than one single location with all buses going through town, when very few people, for the kind of usage we have here, are sort of going to a bus station to change a bus and get somewhere else. So that's an idea. And quite another question about the emptiness of Fairsaver buses going past people's houses and seeing how empty they are, and being able to review current routes. And I know that's an issue in other towns where routes are often have been set some years ago, and are often around a very traditional 9-to-5 working pattern that doesn't take into account, for example, parents that have to drop children at childcare and then get on a bus to get somewhere else. And that, the kind of links between, if you want people to get a bus to the station and they've also got to get a child to childcare, how do you combine those kind of patterns across town? What else do we have here? There's lots of comments and ideas. Need for carrots and sticks. So many car parks in town. Why not redevelop some of those? We're moving a bit into housing there. I mean, a question I had is there such a thing as an adult cycling proficiency exam? I used to cycle all around London for 15 years, and then didn't for quite a while, and now I'm too nervous to get back on a bike on the road. Yes,
Kerry, it's called bikeability. Am I right about that, Richard? Yeah, so you can look that up. You can do a course. There are definitely instructors in Bristol. I hope there are some closer than that.
Bikeability, fantastic. Any other questions that people have? I can see a hand. Hi, Cressida. I hope I pronounced your name correctly. Do you want to unmute yourself?
Yeah, you've pronounced it beautifully. Thank you. Probably rather an obvious one, but our 14-year-old car died a few weeks ago, and my husband and I have decided not to replace it, certainly for the time being. We can't afford an electric car. So it's quite, we're having a year's trial without a car. It's quite challenging because my husband John has had 2 strokes, can walk quite long distances, but so we really need now, and he's learning to ride a bike again. I'm using the bike a lot more. So we really need some help with local cycle routes, especially for John, keeping off roads away from cars while getting confidence again on a bike, and also bus routes. We've got John has a doctor's appointment in a week's time up in Hathaway surgery. It's a 45-minute walk there and back, but what buses, where's the best place to find reliable timetables without walking all the way around town and looking at individual bus stops? Any ideas from people about how to get best cycle routes around Chippenham and the best reliable timetables and where the stops are?
Great question, thank you.
Okay, can I answer that?
Yep.
Yes, there is a bus to Pipsmore Road. It's an alley bus, and that's quite close to Hathaway surgery.
That would be great. Can we have a paper or an online timetable for exactly what buses go?
Did I inject at that point?
If you could go into the town hall, if you could go into the town hall, they probably ought to give you a photocopy or the copy of the timetable.
Okay.
Or if you look at it's quite easy to find. It's quite easy to find on the Fairsaver website. Look for Route 44, and there's like 44A is the bus you want to get.
Thanks, John. That's really helpful.
Yes, but there's also the bus out to let's see. Well, it could be the bus out to Kington, St Michael, or Malmesbury. The 91 or the 92 might be able to be useful as well.
Can I just interject at that point? Would that be okay? So do you know how to use Google Maps?
I do, yeah.
So Google Maps will give you a public transport option if you click at the top there, and it has a pretty good rundown of all the buses in Chippenham. So it will give you walking times between the buses,
Brilliant.
Which bus to take, and it gives you an update automatically on which bus is the quickest. So
brilliant.
I just typed in Bumpers Farm. It'll take me 35 minutes to walk there. It'll take me 31 minutes if I walk to the bus stop and wait for a bus. So maybe it'll encourage me to get the bus. And there's a little hack, which I'm not really sure we're meant to be using, but Bristol has a service called Better by Bike. It's an algorithm that they use on Google Maps.
Yeah.
And if you go through that, you can then zoom out on Google Maps and go to Chippenham and still use their algorithm.
That once you start talking algorithms, you've
ignore the algorithms. It'll tell you where to ride. So it'll give you an option for an off-road route, a quiet road route, and a main road route. So
I'm writing all this down. Better by Bike, and sort of zoom out and towards Chippenham.
Yeah, basically head over and cheat and use it for Chippenham as well. The algorithm is somebody else's that you can use. But,
thank you. Thanks, everyone. We just need as much information as possible. And John, thanks. I will go, or John will go to the town hall and just get as many timetables out of them as possible.
Yeah. Yeah, Fairsafe are quite good, but a lot of companies have finished doing printed timetables. But
Absolutely.
yes,
Yeah.
but
And
yes.
I'm just going to move. I'm going to move us on just because.
Thank you. Thanks very much.
And not much time. Thank you. It's also like what an inspirational story for us all to try a bit harder. Matthew, you had your hand up, and then back to Rob.
Yeah, following on from that, I think there is a Chippenham cycle map, isn't there, put out by Wiltshire Council? Because I've certainly used it. It's great because it shows, you know, for example, I want to go to Corsham, and it shows, rather than cycling up Rowden Hill, which is pretty, you know, daunting, even if you've got an e-bike, if you're sort of not confident. It shows you the back routes that are flat, and you know, through a tunnel. Does anybody know?
I've just done a quick Google search, and I've got Connecting Wiltshire, bikemap.net, or just the 403 Sustrans.
I think it's Connecting Wiltshire, yeah.
Connecting Wiltshire. I'm going to drop the link to that in the chat, so you can have that if people want to add that. I know that one of you know, for me with buses, it's like that electronic thing that tells you when the bus is coming at the bus stop. That would make such a difference, because sometimes you're walking, you're trying to judge what would be better to get the bus or to keep walking or to do something else, especially if you've got kids and you're, you know how patience and how long they're going to wait and so on. And also being able to link that stuff to your phone so people know like when to leave their house. That was the thing I miss about living in the big city, is you can connect it to an app, so you don't have to be waiting at the bus stop for 45 minutes if the weather's bad, if it's cold, if there's not a good shelter. You know, you can time sort of exactly when to leave. But I don't know how, you know, that kind of thing is developing for smaller towns. I don't know if anybody else knows. Rob, did you want to come back in with something else? Have you still got your hand up?
Oh yeah, so I've still got my hand up. I mean, primarily I just wanted to come back in on your earlier comment about cycling proficiency, and then Cressida came in and with this sort of really inspirational story about just dumping everything and getting on a bike, which is fantastic. And ultimately, often you need a catalyst to jump over that edge. But one of the things I've had to remind myself after moving from Bristol to Chippenham is that it's just important to pick the bike up as you go out the door. And the first day, you go ride through the park once, and it'll just mean that it's sitting there at the front and you pick it up. And by the third day, it's second nature. You pick up the bike and you walk out the door. It's when it starts to build up underneath the newspapers that you forget about it altogether and lose confidence. So yeah, you don't need to necessarily do some big statement. You can just go out one day and think, well, I'll ride for 100 meters to Tesco's to pick up a can of Coke or something. It's whatever it is, just get on your bike.
Thank you. Any other questions? I had one about, you know, where you were sharing that map of the cycle routes in Chippenham that you're trying to build up. Is there a particular place that people can, is there a particular way for people to pass information on if they want to contribute their views about cycle routes, but not necessarily get involved in a long-term way in the group? Is it just use the email address or the website, or is there, do you do a survey? What's the best way to do that?
Obviously getting involved is great. And then so we have the website, which I put the web address up, the Cycle Chippenham, and there should be a contact form on there, so you can at any point get involved. You can come and actually encourage us to do specific things. So we've had some new members recently who've come in who are much more policy based. Let's argue on Wiltshire to be spending 20% on cycle infrastructure, not 1%, that sort of policy basis. Or you can be a very practical person who says, actually, there's a drop curb missing at the end of my lane and I'd like to come in and get involved with that. And I think, as Melanie said, we are working on that map to update it with Nick. The problem is that the old map has quite a few irregularities, paths that are shown as cycle paths that then have no cycling signs at the end of them and things like that, which need to all be addressed before we can put it out publicly, if that makes sense. So.
Thanks, Rob. Melanie, you've got your hand up. There's a little bit of feedback there. Do you want to try again?
Is that any better?
Mel, if you have two devices connected, if you can mute one of them, that would prevent it, hopefully.
Alternatively, feel free to drop your question or comment in the chat and I'll read it out, or if that's easier. Anybody else got any questions? I had one about electric the electric bikes. Is there like different safety considerations, like in terms of like the highway code? Are you following like the highway code for bikes or for motorbikes, or is
it's for bikes? Yes,
Oh.
it's still classed as a bike. Otherwise, it's a moped.
Okay, yeah.
So that's why you're turning the cranks, and the cranks, there's that detector that's detecting that movement and engaging the motor. So that still keeps it as a bicycle and not as a moped.
I've got Melanie's question through now. She was saying she wants to involve all 5 modes of transport and work together, I'm guessing in like a bit more of a systemic way, you know, so they can all connect up, which sounds like a great idea. Gary was asking, why is there a 15-mile-per-hour limit on electric bikes? And James, I don't know if you've got your hand up to ask a question or to answer that question. He wants to answer it, I think.
Yeah, so I'm Richard, jump in and correct me if I'm wrong about this, but I believe it's this legal thing that it classes it as a bicycle rather than you know, a moped or a vehicle for which you would need a license. So I think mopeds and motorbikes and so on you would need a license for. So I mean, in my mind, it's arguable that you know, if these bikes have a 15-mile-per-hour limit, then perhaps cars ought to at least have a 70-mile-per-hour limit or something that's physically limiting them. You can go faster than that if you pedal like mad, just as you can on an ordinary bicycle, but you won't probably if you're going uphill. If you're going downhill on them, you know, with a lot of weight on a cargo bike, you can go you know, very fast. So usual caution applies, but I believe that's the reason. It's a legal thing.
It is higher in Europe. I think they have a slightly higher maximum speed in Europe, and people do hack their controllers to make the threshold higher. So
I'm sure I've seen triathletes going out faster than 15 miles an hour as well on a Sunday morning, but I'm not going to open that particular can of worms.
Yeah, stop you from going more than 15 miles an hour. It just the motor cut out to 15 miles an hour. And some cut out drastically and some cut out very gradually.
Any final questions before we run out of time and Michael or Matt goes? Matthew?
Yeah, I did a switch bike conversion last year, and if you're hesitant about cycling, electric bikes, it's like being 10 years old again. They're great. It takes about 2.5 hours to charge on a 13 amp plug top. You can carry the battery with you. That's enough to get me to Corsham and back. I got some tyres off of Richard because, as he says, your normal kind of mountain bike tyres, I got loads of punctures. Richard gave me a pair of hybrid. Are you stocking switch bike spares, Richard?
No. It's switch is difficult because they order in bulk periodically, and they put something out on the internet which enables you to get a discount if you pre-order, and that's how they finance it basically. So
just before, I can see Matt's just about to come in and close us down, but I just wanted to acknowledge Melanie's comment about, you know, a lot of emphasis on cycling, and not everybody can cycle or wants to cycle, but I think there are plans afoot to have other webinars that cover things like car sharing and other options for more sustainable ways of travel, to just acknowledge that. Thanks, Matt.
Did you have a quick one, Rob? I just saw your hand up there quickly.
I was just going to reinforce what Kerry was saying, that essentially we all agree anything that will get you out of a car, we're fully behind. I'm not a cycle only person.
Okay, great. Well, thanks very much for that, everybody.
Can I just say that closing the bus station would be an absolute disaster for buses. We certainly don't want houses to be built on the bus station. that would ruin the bus services. They need to terminate off road, and they need about 30 minutes sometimes for breaks, so that they comply with the law on the driver's hours. So it would really be a disaster if the bus station closed, I think. Thanks.
Okay, thanks, John. Well, thanks everybody for tonight. We probably could have gone a lot longer. It's been great to see so much engagement, and thanks so much to our speakers. Very, very interesting. Some great interesting stuff in the chat as well that I've been following. Just leaves me to say thank you all for your attendance, and we'll see you again soon. Take care. Good night. Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.